Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Nick Griffin Beyond the Pale. It's the 15th of July, so that's well over another half a year gone. Time does fly when you're having fun. Right, whether you're joining me live right now and see that Ivan C is in here already, or whether you're joining me later on like most working Brits, you're all very welcome indeed. Well, lots for you today, so I want to dive straight into it. First of all, a couple of bits of really big news because it's a news review of the week. So here in Britain, of course, we've had the murder of Anne Widdecombe, one of the few decents, basically. Okay, she was a capitalist, but she was pro-life. She was pro-normality, pro-family values. Anne Widdecombe, I believe, was a good woman, even though she was in the Conservative Party. And then, of course, later on with Nigel Farage. And she was brutally murdered. The police, after the usual shenanigans of trying to avoid everything, which makes everyone very suspicious indeed, finally plumped on the person they arrested was apparently a man in his late 20s from Rotherham, hundreds of miles away. The police said there's absolutely no terrorism. This is just some sort of crime, because you very often drive hundreds of miles away to murder someone you don't know. But they've now said that it's terrorism. So various people out there with the tinfoil hats on saying, no, this is a cover up. This is obviously something else. It's a deep state wet job because she was with Reform. No, Reform is essentially part of the deep state. So no, it was a Muslim crime, but they daren't tell us what it could have been because she's really quite anti-Islamic. But it appears she wasn't. No, there's another very simple, logical explanation for this. The police have asked us not to speculate. Don't know why. You simply have to say the alleged killer. That's entirely standard. And the alleged killer, it now turns out, the police have said, does indeed have a possible terrorist motivation because his house contained, and presumably his internet connections and so on, also showed far left affiliations. So the Daily Mail rushed in and said, Russian communists, it's obviously Vladimir Putin. No, it's not. Pound for a penny that the alleged killer, especially if it was him and it comes in trial, it will emerge that he was a homosexual trans ally, because the intersection between the radical trans movement and Antifa is the most dangerous and violent place by a country mile in British politics today. And in that, I include the Islamists. And yeah, there are seriously dangerous Islamists out there. The sort of people that David Cameron let loose on Libya, who then came back and blew up the Manchester Arena. There's lots on lots of the CIA, MI6s and Mossad's useful idiot jihadists out there. They're very dangerous. But nobody, I believe you that me, none of them at present are as dangerous as the Antifa trans alliance. And I think that's what's gone on with Anne Widdecombe, but we will find out more in due course. Let me dive in, joined by Ivan C. Anthony H. Good to see you, sir. Good morning, says Anthony. So obviously a long way west from here. And John Kopasaki. Good to see you, John. Also a long way west from here. Right. So what next? Yeah, next news. The Iran war is back on. Yep. Oil futures saw their largest single day gain since April yesterday. So although I think the British public, don't know about the American public, but people here don't even seem to notice that the war, which will strangle their energy supply and our economy, is just come back on. What on earth is going on? Well, Mr. Trump now says that he's lost patience with the Iranians. They're scumbags. Very, very, very diplomatic language. And so he's going back to war, which is bizarre, because he stopped the war when he was told by very senior advisors indeed that even America, despite having large amounts of oil, hasn't totally got the right kind of oil, especially hasn't got the right kind of jet fuel unless it imports. And he was told that America and the whole world economy was 4 weeks of catastrophe if the war continued. And that's why America signed the Memorandum of Understanding with Iran, which was nothing less than a surrender document. That was signed on the 17th of June because the war was lost, or rather the war could not be won. And if the war continued, as Donald Trump himself said, we're 4 weeks away from economic catastrophe. And in that, he was parroting what he'd been told by people who know what they're talking about. Donald Trump was telling the truth back in the middle of last month when he said, we were so close to economic catastrophe, we had to reach a deal. Now the deal's been done. Isn't it great? Well, trouble is, of course, that now we're back to square one. The war is back on. The deal has been broken. But it's worse than where we were when the war started back in March, when Netanyahu conned Donald Trump into going to war. It's far worse than that, because at that stage, the world in general, and America in particular, despite Joe Biden running them down, had enormous oil reserves. The Chinese had enormous oil reserves. And America, Europe, and China drew on their oil reserves. They also, Donald Trump, very wisely actually, unsanctioned Russian oil. Shouldn't have been sanctioned in the first place, but he unsanctioned that. He even unsanctioned Iranian oil. As far as I know, the first time ever that you've had a serious power at war with an enemy whose economy it then helps to the tune of billions of pounds. Very, very odd. But anyway, those things taken together meant that the oil shock, which cutting off 20% of the world's oil in a world where all oil is priced in the same way, that oil shock was heavily cushioned by those reserves being released and those sanctioned reserves at sea being allowed to be sold and used. It's all gone. So the energy crisis will bite much quicker this time. The millions of tons of oil that flowed through the Straits of Hormuz in the last couple of weeks were mainly on their way to China. So they're not going to help us. They're not going to help to keep the oil price down across the world or in the United States. This is going to get very painful very quickly. And in the end, Donald Trump will only have one option: to nuke Iran and to destroy it. And bet your life that the Iranians will take out all of America's allies in the Middle East in very legitimate and understandable retaliation. Or we've got to walk away and have another peace, or just, well, nothing to do with me anymore, Gov. So this is either this going back to war. This is either going back to a war which Donald Trump was elected saying he would stop these unwinnable forever wars for foreign interests. That's the real problem here. But anyway, going back to war is either staggering folly, which will lead to economic, energy, and food catastrophe, or it's deliberate provocation, which will lead to economic, energy, and food catastrophe by design. I don't know which it is, but it's one or the other, and believe you me, this is not going to end well. Right, let me just dive into the chat here and say hello. Where are we? There we go. Stuart Bowden. Hello, Stuart. Good to see you. And Ivan C. Yeah, indeed, it's the lack of fertilizers, which is the main problem in this country here, especially with the anti-farming policy of the Labour government. Yep, absolutely so, Ivan. And it's, in fact, it's the shortage of fertilizer, and the increased cost of fertilizer, which is going to be the big problem, one of the big problems for all of us, especially in the formerly white world, including the United States, because American farmers and even most British farmers will be able to carry on buying fertilizer, although there are shortage problems. But most of all, this is going to be rationing by price. And millions of poor farmers, basically subsistence farmers in Africa and in parts of Asia, who've been dragged into the corporate high energy input agriculture of the modern world, they are not going to get fertilizer at all. They and their families are going to go hungry. Their communities will go hungry. Their countries will be ravaged by shortages, hunger, famine, unrest, and revolution. And millions upon millions upon millions of Africans and Asians and South Americans will think, I've got nothing left here now. What shall I do? I know. I'll go to the United States. I'll go to France. I'll go to Spain. They'll amnesty me. I'll go to Sweden, and I will go to Britain, and they will come. And the chaos that's still going on in the Lebanon, and which Israel wants to roll out over the huge swathe of the Middle East, which it claims for its God-given right. That will only add millions and millions more very angry Muslim refugees to the millions and millions and millions of very hungry refugees from the rest of the third world. The arrival of these people and growing popular resistance to that arrival is going to basically shape the politics of the next few years. Right then. Now, that's one war which is back on. So I'm going to tell you now about a very old war, which is basically back off, or off, hopefully for good. And this is in Northern Ireland. Now, in Northern Ireland, in County Tyrone, well over to the west, near the largely Catholic town of Dungannon, in a part of Northern Ireland which was basically bandit country for the British Army and for the Protestant minority during the Troubles. In that area, there's a little village called Moygashel. And Moygashel has 1,000 people, 92% of whom are Protestant. So it's got basically just over 900 loyalists. This tiny little Protestant enclave in largely Republican County Tyrone. And because they've lived like that for decades, and actually their people, their bloodline have lived like that for centuries, going right back to the 1640s, 1642 was the first massacre of Protestant and English or Scots borders settlers. So hundreds of years they've lived with a siege mentality and ferociously sectarian attitudes. Yes, sectarian attitudes by them against their neighbours and vice versa. And this little town of Moygashel is really a sort of microcosm of loyalist Ulster, but on communal steroids, because it was so isolated and so much under pressure. Now, as a result, many of you will know that July the 12th is the day in which Ulster loyalists, not the other side, celebrate, or always celebrated, the victory of the Protestant King William at the Battle of the Boyne over the Catholic James II. For centuries, they've celebrated this with, among other things, a great big bonfire on July the 12th, unless it falls on a Sunday, in which case it's always on July the 13th. You can't go around burning effigies of your neighbours on the Lord's Day. It's just not done. So the old bonfires in Moygashel used to look rather like, hold on, where is it? Let me find you a picture of one of the old bonfires. There we go. So you see these things are huge, built with enormous numbers of pallets. There in Pride of Place is an Irish tricolour and all the other Irish tricolours, and they're not there to celebrate being part of Ireland. They're there to go up in flames, because those people are or were fanatically anti-Irish and Catholic, the idea of being involved with the Catholic majority. That KAT sign isn't a misspelt cat. It stands for Kill All Taigs, Kill All Catholics. It's a standard slogan going back hundreds of years. Bear in mind that these people were the victims of attempts by their Catholic neighbours to kill all Protestants. So it is for tit for tat, and no one is innocent here. Anyway, that's what. It's not just one bonfire that happens to take place at this one village. There are hundreds of these, if not thousands, go up every single July the 12th. Some of them even bigger than this one. And anyway, that's what they used to look like. Now, it's begun to change. It began to change quite over the last couple of years, actually. And so last year, this is what the Moygashel bonfire looked like. If it'll come up. There we go. Right. Now you get a better idea of the size of this thing there. And on top of it, if you can see that, is stop the boats. Refugees are not welcome. And on top of the bonfire, there was a model, life-size model of an inflatable boat, a rib, packed with asylum seekers. And this caused outrage last year. And it was all racism and all the rest of it. And just to add to the outrage, the bonfire committee of Moygashel put on the top of the fire, before they set light to it, their traditional tricolour. So although the people that they were burning had changed. Nevertheless, it was still sectarian as well as racist. The Liberals went absolutely berserk. Here's an example which just shows a bit more of that, actually. This was the headlines before last year. It shows the boat rather better. Calls to remove racist, stop the boat's bonfire display. Again, you see the size of that thing, quite remarkable, isn't it? Bear in mind, this is one little village with 900 people in total. Roughly speaking, 450 men, probably 200 young men at most. And they've done that. And the villagers raised the money to do it. And they do it every single year. It really was quite a remarkable example and symbol of the ancient brothers' war hatred that's gone on in Northern Ireland and Ireland generally for so long. Anyway, that was last year. But this year, something changed completely. And this is this year's Moigashel. Secure our borders. End the threat of radical Islam. And on top of it, they put, before they set light to it, a model mosque, completely with star and crescent, and also, before they burnt it, instead of tricolours, there were no tricolours at all on this bonfire this year. There were the black and white flags of ISIS, Daesh, the pet jihadis of the Western elites. But the people putting the bonfire up don't know that. They're just radical Muslims, and they are the new danger, the new threat. And furthermore, when some obviously rather disappointed liberal journalist asked the bonfire committee, well, why haven't you got a tricolour on your bonfire this year? And the Moigashel Bonfire Committee, one of the most radical, in a very radical milieu, said this: there will never be a tricolour on our bonfire again. Because, especially with social media, the young men, they've grown up. Actually, they still don't meet with their Catholic neighbours. They don't go to school with them and so on. They don't even socialise with them. But they've grown up conversing with them on social media. They've grown up playing video games with them on social media. The old sectarianism has died completely. I was speaking to Jim, and no doubt we'll be speaking more about this tomorrow, Jim Dowson, who was, of course, on the one of the parades, one of the 18 or so, but one of the big ones in Belfast. He said it was quite remarkable that there were very significant numbers of right-wing Catholic lads up, especially from the south, just to be part of this and enjoy it. He said there was not the slightest sectarian animosity, let alone hostility to them. But believe me, everyone can tell. They can tell from the way they look. They can tell certainly the moment they open their mouths. They can tell that these are Irish Catholics. And they were there in significant numbers in the parades. And nobody gave a damn, because they understand that the Irish Catholic youth face the same danger as Protestant loyalist youth, which is mass immigration imposed by the elites, destroying the very basis of their society. And so they're coming together on account of this. It really is something quite remarkable. Both sides have seen that when you let in large numbers of certain immigrant communities, you get crime, you get muggings, you get girls being sexually abused, and you get rapes and you get murders. And both sides have realized that their ancient sectarian divisions are very small beer indeed compared to the threat that's coming down the road. So it's a quite remarkable change around. It really is. I can't stress how big it is. You know, Moigashel, 450 men, it lost 2 young men shot dead by the IRA during the Troubles because they were members of the UVF, that's the Loyalist paramilitary. Now, as far as the vast majority of the inhabitants of Moigashel are concerned, the UVF men were heroes, without whom their village would have been overwhelmed by the IRA's relentless sectarian murders and ethnic cleansing campaigns. But equally to Catholics around the village, the UVF themselves were sectarian murderers. And the old hatreds ran deeper in County Tyrone than probably anywhere else in Northern Ireland other than South Armagh, and they've evaporated. It's quite remarkable. So, as with the recent cross-community rioting after the attempted beheading in Belfast, when the two sides joined together to riot and put out immigrants, I'm not saying it's a good thing, I'm just saying it happened. The old brothers' war in Northern Ireland is dead. Simple as that. The two sides have realized they have a new common enemy: mass immigration, the various ills it brings, and those who impose it. Now, this is a really good thing, obviously, not just for the 6 counties of Northern Ireland. It's also of enormous importance to the future of the Republic of Ireland, because the people down in the south will be looking increasingly sympathetically at the people they used to hate in the north, and the people they used to hate in the north are more militant even than they are. And if, for that matter, in Southern Ireland, it really kicks off big scale between the immigrants and the left and the state on one side and the Irish people on the other, and that is how it will unfold if it all goes ping-tong, then the loyalist paramilitaries and people of Northern Ireland will intervene on behalf of the Catholic Irish of the South. And that alone changes the balance of power and the balance of probabilities of what is going to happen on a huge scale. More than that, this has the potential to become a major factor. Northern Ireland has the potential to become a really major factor in the future history of the British mainland. There were thousands of English on parades here this year. Thousands, far more than ever before. Now, partly they're there because GB News for the last couple of years has been showing this is the 12th. It's the largest. The Telegraph once described it as the largest uncommercialized folk festival in the whole of Western Europe. And indeed it is. It's one of the largest uncommercialized folk festivals on the entire planet. And Brits on the mainland didn't know about it. British patriots didn't know about it. Well, now because of GB News, they do. So thousands were at the parades this year, and thousands moved lock, stock and barrel with their family, mainly from places like the Black Country, from multicultural Birmingham, from the last bits of East London where old traditional Londoners are being overwhelmed by the incomers. Thousands of those people and their families moved last year to Northern Ireland for good. It's a big, big thing that's going on, because once they're there, well, several things are going to happen. One, you can kiss goodbye if you're still a rank Republican to the idea that because the Catholic majority is now large enough, they're going to vote for a united Ireland, because over the course of the next 5 years or so, the number of people moving in from England is going to retip the demographic balance in favour of continued unity with the British state. Yep, that's going to happen. More important than that, people who have gone to Northern Ireland from England but still have family in England, when, stroke if, the counter-jihadist fanatics, with the millions of pounds they're pouring in to try to bring civil war to Europe, to Britain, and I've talked about it before, it's a big, big thing. If they succeed, then there's going to be very significant numbers of English with very close ties to Northern Ireland and everything that that entails. Furthermore, even before that happens, the more English people go, the more English people visit, the more English people see the power of the band culture that the Protestants have, and the more and the quicker it will spread to the mainland. And it's one of the key factors that must and will develop in the end to turn the English from being a soft, soppy, disorganized shambles into a tribe. It's going to come anyway. It's going to come a damn sight quicker because of the existence of Northern Ireland and what's happening there. If you don't believe me, just watch. Right then, let me jump in and see what you're thinking of all of that. So yes, if the North intervenes, that will be the first domino across Europe, says Ivan. You're absolutely right. Brian Hope, good to see you, sir. Kit Bear has joined us. Excellent. Right. Yep. Good to see you. And Brian as well. Yep. Plenty of you here. Good. Right. Let me carry on with the show then, shall I? Because, oh, yeah, we're doing all right here. But some more good stuff to talk about, I think. Yeah. I promised for a couple of issues, so I'm going to do this now rather than leave it to the end and possibly run out of time. I promised to review this book, Legal, Truthful, Guilty, Diary of a Political Prisoner by Samuel Melia. Right, now who is Sam Melia, you may ask? Well, I've got a picture of Sam here. Bang. There's Sam and his wife. They've got a couple of young daughters, and one of the stickers, which has a group called the 100 Handers, he was designing online, making available online, and telling people what sort of printer to go and buy to print your own stickers and go putting them out. And here's one of them. It's okay to be white, which was initially described as hate speech by the treacherous powers that run our unfortunate country. But in the course of the trial, it actually emerged, and this is really quite remarkable, it emerged that the prosecution admitted that everything, every single sticker that Sam Melia had produced and put available online was legal. They also admitted that truth is no defense. So therefore you don't look at the question of whether they're true, but believe you me, everything on those stickers was true. It was all legal, said the state. But that didn't matter, because what they alleged to the jury was that Sam Melia intended, by the use of legal stickers, to illegally stir up racial hatred. It's an incredibly twisted piece of legal, it's not legal logic, it's legal deceit. Now, I've got no time for the organisation that Sam Melia was involved with. He was and still is involved in Patriotic Alternative, which is one, in my opinion, of the worst of the deliberately misleading neo-Nazi pseudo-gangs, which is full of very decent young men being led astray by a man who I expelled from the British National Party for stealing large sums of money from it, and among other things for threatening both me and Jim Dowson with murder, and going as far as collecting £10,000 to try to pay for that. He was let off by the police. I wonder why. So I've got no time at all for Patriotic Alternative or its leadership. But Sam Melia, who's actually quite high in it, I've read his book, and I have to say that it's not a magnificent work of prose. Some on the right have said, oh, Sam Melia, Diary of a Political Prisoner, he's the British version of Antonio Gramsci, the Italian Marxist theorist who was locked up by Mussolini and sat scribbling for years his prison notebooks. Now, the prison notebooks of Gramsci were about serious thoughts. They were about revolution. They were about making revolution. They actually helped to make, unfortunately, the revolutions of 1968. The man was, a bit like Lenin and Trotsky, a political genius. And Sam Melia isn't. But he certainly shouldn't have been in prison. And in the book, I'd say that if you're interested in the far right of British politics, if you're interested in the British prison system, or in injustice, then you should read this book. And I think Sam Melia deserves that you should go and buy his book. It is available on Amazon. He comes across as a thoroughly decent man, not by any means the cleverest, but thoroughly decent and a loving father and a loving husband. He emerges as a kind man. At one stage in this, he's worried that if he's moved, although the move would be better for him, it's going to mean a weaker prisoner, who at the time is sharing his cell, may have a really hard time of it. So that's a kind thing. I think that Sam Melia was very ill-served, especially by Patriotic Alternative, and it comes across in the book that there's no solid ideology that the people, he'd spent years in PA, he's got no solid ideology, no real faith at all, certainly not Christian faith. What do you expect in an organisation whose leader's great book is an assessment of the plight of the white race through the twisted ideas of Sigmund Freud? Come on, what a joke. But to be fair to PA, and Mark Collett for that matter, because he leads it, PA did provide serious, useful and sustained financial and moral support to Sam Melia's family while he was in prison. So fair play to them for that. The British far right very, very badly needs, in fact, the British people as a whole, very, very badly need to have the decent people in prison, or including the common decent criminals, and there still are some, being organised, because at present our prisons are mainly run by Islamist mafias and by drugs gangs with, as emerges in this book, the full knowledge and connivance of the people running the prison service. It's time, way past time already, to have our people like us, organised in prison to protect themselves, to run their wings, and to make sure that being put in prison, if you're a patriot, a nationalist, a traditionalist, being put in prison takes you from your family. Yes. It's a punishment. Yes. It's a hardship. Yes. But it's not a sentence of death, which potentially it is at present when people are put into Jihad Central, which is what many of our prisons now are. So Sam Melia's book, I thought, I've got a few minutes left, I thought I'd read a few bits of this to you. What have we got here? Yes, how on earth did they convict him when they admitted that everything he'd said he was putting out was legal? Well, the main thing was they had a poster of Hitler, and they just show that to the jury and it's game over, I'm afraid. And it's so stupid, and it's part of the wickedness of groups like PA, that they've got this snigger hidden, 1888, whatever, special birthday party on April the 20th, I think it is. Yeah. Far from stamping this nonsense out, they actually encourage it. So Sam Melia was caught with a poster of Hitler. He says, my dad asked me what I'd say about the Hitler poster when I get out. I said, I don't feel the need to defend the poster. I don't think anyone should receive a 2-year sentence for a poster. Remember, a 3-year counter-terror investigation culminated in my arrest and a house search before they even knew the poster existed. Counter-terror basically got lucky that my friends and I had an edgy sense of humour. Without that poster, they basically had no case. That's why they had to go on with intent rather than convicting me on any hard evidence. So he actually admits in here he got a 2-year prison sentence away from his family in very dangerous circumstances, in very unpleasant prisons, because of an edgy sense of humour which thinks that having a poster of Adolf Hitler is a good idea. Well, even if people thought it was before, they certainly shouldn't think so now, because it was the only thing that sent Sam Melia to prison. Crazy, absolutely crazy, quite apart from the actual other, political, moral problems, etc. It's just tactically so damn stupid. What have we got? Now, I talked about how badly Sam was served by the organisation. He says, as far as I'm aware, and I've been unable to check this in here, because he was writing this while in prison, and an indigenous population being replaced by subversion is unprecedented. And I find myself at a loss as to how to mount a large, effective resistance while basic facts are denied to the mainstream. We have no political representation and our population languishes in comfort. I'm at a loss as to know what to do. He's one of the key figures in what's supposedly Britain's premier hardline nationalist organisation, and he has no clue what to do to build effective resistance to our replacement in our own homeland. Oh, for heaven's sake. Well, because when he wrote this, I hadn't actually started writing on Substack. So he hasn't got an excuse now. But even before that, Jim Dowson, myself, Jada Franson, we were talking about what needs to be done, what can be done in serious, constructive, concrete ways. We've been doing it for 5, 6, 7 years. And even if Mark Collett and co didn't want to give us the credit for it, they could just have stolen the ideas. I don't care. Get on my Substack, Mark. Get some ideas. The same with Rupert Lowe from the other side of the worthless fence of people, actually good people following them and doing nothing useful with them. Get on my Substack, look at the ideas, think, oh, that one would work. We try that one. That'd be popular. I could raise money with that one. Get them and take them and bloody do something, instead of either pretending, in the case of Rupert Lowe, don't worry, just follow me, we'll win the next general election, which they will not. Or the case of Mark Collett, just don't worry, buy me a coffee and I'll entertain you next week as well. It's time to do things, people, to do things. So Sam went on to say, and he's to a degree here, right? I'm forced to conclude that our people simply aren't ready. The sectarian racial politics that we're beginning to see in the run-up to this year's general election will have to become more pronounced. The myriad tribes, good man, Sam, good man, imported into Britain will inevitably flex their political muscle, at which point the white indigenous population will need to ask the question, am I happy to keep losing solo in a team game? And that's wise. That's sensible. Shows that Sam Melia, among many others, is just about ready to really get it and start doing worthwhile things. Let's hope that his leadership gets on with it. Now, another thing I thought was interesting in the book was the non-political stuff. Time and time again, it shows actually just how the main problem in prison, like I've been told many times, problem in war, isn't fear or resentment, it's mainly boredom. The sheer mundane stupidity of the legal system and the people who are in it, and the waste of having young men full of testosterone locked up when they should be locked up in conditions which are either disgustingly slummy or they've got all sorts of games and stuff which as criminal scumbags they shouldn't have. They should be out there in chain gangs doing serious and very, very hard physical work, so that when they get home at night they're too knackered to have gang fights and to bully weaker prisoners or anything. They just want the meal that they've earned through doing their decent work and finishing their work quota, and they want to go to bed because they know at 6 the next morning they're going to get some ex-military sergeant major screaming at them and getting them out there polishing their spades before they go back to work. And there's enough work like that to do. The British Canal network alone, which is one of the wonders of the industrial world and the origins of the industrial world, 2,500 miles of it in almost every county in Britain, near every prison. And it's gradually falling apart because the government is far too happy to spend billions of our pounds on a war that's nothing to do with us in Eastern Europe, but they won't help to conserve and repair, let alone improve, our canal network. And it's nearly all grunt work. They were built by hand, they need repairing by hand, and the prisoners should be doing that. But instead they're sat in their cells festering and doing drugs. And I thought I'd read this quite big chunk actually from this, because I think it sums up rather the vision, the very sordid, nasty vision of our prisons that comes across in this book. 23rd of the 5th, 2024. New padmate went out after a visit today. Bignall, that's his new padmate, his new cellmates. He's a bit of a grug and grunts a lot while eating, which he also does a lot. He deals spice on the wing, and the food servers return the favour by giving him ridiculous amounts of food. Built like a tank, but only 5 feet tall. He's a ball of energy, probably because of whatever he crushes and snorts twice a day. In such small confines, it's unnerving to have him charging about. I got let out this morning, but with all the building works going on here, and the yard being unusable, as there's a cherry picker parked on it, there's nothing to do. With all the on-wing entertainment removed during COVID, there's little to do unless you're the kind of criminal bore who's happy whiling away time talking about past and future crimes. This cell is probably the most prisony I've felt since coming in 3 months ago. Extremely claustrophobic. Being paired up in these cells since arriving at Hull isn't giving me any time to properly relax or let go emotionally. I've been receiving a few birthday cards already, and one brought me to tears. It simply said, "You are not forgotten." Had a banging headache all day, which had me in a foul mood. Called Laura at 6 p.m, but she had a live stream. So I said I'd call back. Ended up falling asleep and waking up at 11:30 p.m. Tried Laura, but she didn't pick up, so watched a bit of TV and read until 2 a.m. and went back to sleep. So 11 p.m, he'd go and try and use a phone and phone his wife. And then he's allowed to watch TV and can read until 2 a.m. and then go to sleep. Now again, in a properly run prison, which was there for punishment and rehabilitation, and to be as good to those men as they deserve anyone doing them good, none of that would be possible. He'd be banged up at an appropriate hour. He'd be there and he'd be desperate to get enough sleep because he'd know, like I said before, that come 6 o'clock in the morning, they were going back out to work. Come rain, snow, hail, sleet, or whatever, they'd be going out there doing useful things for their country and getting hopefully a little bit fitter and getting some skills to give them more chance when they get out of there of going straight, instead of being left with drugs and prisoners just sat around talking about what they're going to do next. The whole thing is utterly dysfunctional, and it comes across really rather well, I think, in this book. Right, running low on time now. I hope I've given you at least a flavour of it. There's other things actually that I'd sort of thought as I've gone through. I quite can see these various markers I put in, but I thought, yeah, there is a relevance to that. It would probably interest you. What have I got here? Yeah, this I think is interesting. It gives an idea of the menace, the danger that's there in prison. 9th of August 2024. There's something in the air. Yes, there was something in the air yesterday. The big black guy who's the list reader on Servery, Vince, kicked off with my pad mate Jason and Hamilton. Number 2 kicked off with a small lad who goes by the name of Sonic. Vince ended up coming to the pad in the afternoon. He must have considered what a fight would mean for him. Sent to isolation, basic canteen, and losing his valuable PI desk and servery jobs. I was about to head for the shower, made a point of fussing with my shelves so I could remain in the cell should Vince start to get physical again. They made up anyway, even had a jokey hug, and when they called yard, we had loads of guys out. Maybe 12 of us playing ball, and it was a really good vibe with everyone smiling, either playing or spectating. What a weird mix too. Romanians, Lithuanians, blacks, and us local whites. What a mess. What a waste. What a waste of young time, young energy, and our money. But anyway, as I say, I think it's well worthwhile. So thank you, Samelia, and well done. Like I say, it's not revolutionary politics, but it's a searingly honest account of the dangers, the injustices, the violence, and the sheer boredom of the British political system. Right then, let me dive back into the show. Anyone here been to prison similarly? With comments on it. Ivan C. I'm fed up with the commentators who highlight the problems and never offer a solution, which, as you know, I try to do. Kit Bear says, bring back the Victorian prisons and workhouses. I agree with the first, Kit. Absolutely, bring back the prisons, not the workhouses. They put our people in the workhouses because they stole our land, a third of our entire country, off us in order to give us a choice of either dying in the workhouse or dying in industrial forced labor camps in the Industrial Revolution. No, I'm not in favor of the workhouses, although had they been run properly for people, and they weren't, the rich got to what they call farm the poor. They were given a certain amount for each inmate of the workhouse every week, and everything they could save by not giving them enough food, not giving them bedding, not giving them any heat, they could keep for themselves. They farmed the poor of England. They herded us off our land. They herded us into the most disgusting conditions, and then they herded the people who couldn't even cope with that into the workhouses, where they made money from the taxpayers out of their misery. So the idea that if people hadn't been able to fend for themselves, they could have gone in and done decent, honest work and been properly rewarded for it, that would have been a just thing. But the workhouses as they stood, that was not a just system at all. It was part of the monstrous, utterly monstrous assault on our people, dispossession of our people, and wholesale robbery, a murder of our people in the first, or perhaps great second, if you count the theft of the monasteries and their lands as the first great reset. It was one of the past great resets. You always get these. Basically, whenever you have an elite, which for some economic, social, and military reason, suddenly gets extra power over the masses, they will reset it and rob the masses to the point of death. It's what the bastards do. They did it then, and they're still trying to do it now. Right then, yes, Kit, thank you. I know Kit's a good man. I meant if they were run correctly. Yes. I see. Sounds like my working day. Stuart Bowden, have you listened to the Paul English show or Eric Von Essex's? I haven't either. Stuart, do if you can, drop me a line. By all means, come on Substack and message me there. Right, Ivan, you're right. The monasteries were the first welfare system, and their destruction produced in Elizabethan times what they called sturdy beggars, who were people who could no longer get by but were whipped from place to place because they were capable of working, but there was no one there looking after them. Right, it's basically time up, or very nearly, so I'm going to dive back into my notes here and see what I've got. Yes, I thought this was, are we going to bother with this one? Yes, Keir Starmer about to resign. Well, he resigned on the 22nd of June, hosted an LGBTQ event for Pride Month at 10 Downing Street. One of the last things that he's done. He was introduced by one of the Labour's lesbians. Maybe he's got a picture of that, actually. Hang on. Hold on. Wait here. Don't go away. There we go. Here's Keir Starmer with, well, would you believe she's a lesbian? No, surely not. And that's Labour MP Olivia Bailey, who joked when she introduced Keir outside Downing Street that her hairstyle was inspired by his, and introduced him as a lesbian style icon. To which Keir Starmer, our late and unlamented Prime Minister, replied, I'm really proud that we've got the gayest parliament. I don't think just of all time, anywhere in the world, I don't think there's any parliament that is gayer than this parliament. That is fantastic. Apparently the UK Parliament does indeed have 76 members who identify as LGBT, with 62 of them being from the Labour Party, 4 from the Tories, 1 from the Green Party, and 8 from the Liberal Democrats. Keir Starmer said this, I want to be clear that all lesbians, all gay, all bi and trans people, that this government will defend your rights. We have to stand against the politics of division. And he highlighted his full trans inclusive ban on abusive conversion practices, which outlaws a very sinister idea trying to suggest that identities aren't legitimate. Well, wow. What can you make of that? Not even hiding the fact that it's a trans thing as well as the LGBT thing. Hang on, want that to go away? Shoo, go away. What do you make of that? That's what someone's going to make of that. Picture of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And Lot's wife looking back, which wasn't a wise thing because she ended up being turned into a pillar of dust. That at least is what the Bible tells us. And I think there's no doubt about it that the level of degeneracy in Britain today, and indeed the entire Western world, is such that we are heading for shocking vengeance by God, also by nature, actually. This is just so wrong. It's so twisted. It's so perverse. It's so against, not just against Christianity and true faith, it's so against any remotely normal human being way of living, any remotely normal human religion, even the false ones that ever existed. This is some uniquely crazy, twisted thing. We got to the stage when actually to say that we'd be twinned with Sodom and Gomorrah is really unfair on the inhabitants of Sodom and Gomorrah, because all they wanted to do was cop off with angels, by force if necessary, because the angels were so very beautiful. At least you can, it's wrong, you can at least vaguely get that. But you look at the things that are around there now, and the pitiful specimens that, with their full Adam's apple and all the rest of it, maintain I'm a lady, and indulge in terrorist actions against people who don't accept that, then you see that really we've got a very serious problem in this country. But I think you knew that already. Right, I am going to leave you in a moment with a reminder that I hope to be back here next Wednesday, God willing. Do please join me then. Join Jim Dowson here on the Purge TV at 4 p.m. tomorrow, where I'm sure you'll get some really good updates on what's been happening in Northern Ireland and what it means for all our futures. And also, of course, join Jim on Sunday, 4 p.m. on Purge for the Sunday service. So until then, I will leave you not with a music and slate. They're a bit of a problem, actually. I like to put these shows also now on YouTube, where they've allowed me back, at least temporarily. But you put on anything which is copyright and bang, it gets zapped. So instead of that, I've got here a bit of a blast from the past. It's a very short thing. And this is one of my speeches in the European Parliament. She's not one of the minute ones. I think this is one of the 1 minute 30 seconds. That was my special extended ration of democracy and free speech on that occasion. And I'm here speaking about, what am I speaking about in this one? I've got the thing. Hang on, let me just look down. That's it. I'm speaking about Haiti. And this was at a time when there'd just been a ghastly earthquake there. The place is in even bigger ruins than it normally is. And the European Parliament rushed to funnel vast amounts of taxpayers' money at the unfortunate people of Haiti. And what I had to say about it, you will see in a moment, when I've reminded you that freedom is never free, because the tree of liberty must be watered from time to time with the blood of martyrs and of tyrants. Deus vult.
Por 1 minuto y medio del señor Griffin, que se expresa en nombre de los colegas no inscritos.
Mr. President, the horror of Haiti is shocking. It's only human to feel compassion for the innocent victims of this natural disaster. All here are well paid and can afford to give. I will give my attendance allowance for today if every British MEP will do the same. But our constituents cannot afford your generosity with their taxes. Globalism has destroyed our industries, the banks have ruined our economies, EU red tape is strangling our entrepreneurs, and the carbon tax scam is plunging millions into deadly fuel poverty. The death toll in Haiti is shocking, but this winter, more than 50,000 pensioners in Britain alone will die premature deaths because of the cold and the cost of heating. Across Europe, the death toll will run into hundreds of thousands. But because this truth shames the political elite, and because it highlights the inconvenient truth of global cooling, this scandal will be buried as quietly as our elderly dead. Hundreds of thousands of our own people are dying because of government neglect and EU cold taxes. Yet you insist at throwing other people's money at a disaster in somebody else's backyard. This is not compassion, this is stinking hypocrisy. I know this place is uneasy with our Christian heritage, but as always, our Bible reveals an eternal truth that most here would rather ignore. First Book of Timothy 5:8. But if any provide not for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith and is worse than an infidel.
Entramos ahora en la